The book of Judges, session 52. We continue with chapter 15. So the last thing we saw is that Samson burned the enemy's vineyards and standing corn and olives. Then the Philistines said in verse 6, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion." So here the enemies of Samson is really standing up against him. And for some reason, when I read Psalm 56, it made me think of Samson. And in the prophetic symbology, it made me think of Messiah Yeshua. And also, it makes me think of our end-time enemies. And as these enemies of Samson is gathering against him, and as they have conspired against him, remember in the previous sessions where they deceitfully got the answer to the riddle, and now they want to burn his wife, and they threatened her, and eventually they stole his wife away from her, and she was given to a companion. And all these things are happening, and it's prophetic for what happened with Messiah. We saw that correlation. And it's also prophetic for how our enemies in the end days, and even, for the last 2,000 years, how the enemy has been gathering strength against the people of God. And now God's enemy is gathering numbers and devices and ideas that stands against him. So I quickly want to just read for you Psalm 56. And I want to see if you can also find the correlation. Think of Samson, think of Messiah Yeshua, and think of ourselves, we, the end day saints, the called out church of God. How we are going through this wilderness journey and everything we are experiencing along the way until we finally can trust in our God for end time deliverance. "Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. His fighting daily oppresses me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they are many that fight against me, O Most High. What time I am afraid, I will trust in you." Every time I'm afraid, I will trust in you. In God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do to me. Every day they wrestle my words. All their thoughts are evil against me. They gather themselves, they hide themselves, they are hidden, they are working behind closed doors. They hide themselves behind even being friends. They hide themselves, they mark my steps. They look at where I'm going, they look at what I'm doing. They are marking my journey. They are making notes of how I'm walking. And they wait for my soul. Shall they escape by iniquity? In your anger, cast down these people, O Yahuwah. You tell me my wanderings. Put you my tears in a bottle. Are my tears not already in your book? When I cry unto you, then shall my enemies turn back. This I know, God is for me. In Yahuwah will I praise his word. In Yahuwah will I praise his word. Psalm 56 verse 10. Make a note. Praise his word. His word is alive and it's teaching us everything we need to know. In God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. Can you hear this repeat out of the soul of David, out of the soul of Samson at the end of his life, out of the soul of Yeshua, and out of my and your souls? Your vows are upon me, O Yahuwah. I will render praises unto you. For you have delivered my soul from death. Will you not deliver my feet from falling, so that I can walk before my Elohim in the light of the living? I'm getting to love Samson a bit more. At one stage in my life, I didn't like him very much. He did nothing good. He killed a lot of people. Whoop-a-doo. But he only turned to Yahuwah for the first time at the end of his life. He used Yahuwah like an ATM machine. Like we always say, when you're in trouble, then you're looking for Yahuwah. But as I'm working verse by verse through Samson's life, I'm getting a new respect and a new sympathy and a new empathy for Samson, because we are all Samsons. We do whatever we want in our own strength, and we do what we want, and we have, these mixing with the world, not really keeping our covenant Nazarite vows, and we're getting away with it. Samson got away with it for quite some time. Not realizing how God was giving him the strength to overcome the enemy every time he stood up against them, except the last time when he divulged his secret that he wasn't supposed to do. It was a law of God. Do not tell anybody. And he transgressed the law, and that's why he came into trouble. But then when he was in trouble, he cried out again to God, and God heard him. And this is the same with Yeshua. Yeshua was crying to God, and God didn't answer him in the Garden of Gethsemane. And yet he did answer him, because he has been prophesying all throughout Scripture and the prophets and the Torah that he will not leave his servant in Sheol. He will not let him see corruption. And that's why he was raised up in 3 days. So the answer to Yeshua's prayers was already there. And the answer to our prayers is already there. That's why we need to understand Scripture. I praise your word. In God, I praise you. I praise your word. I praise your word all the time, because it is the words coming from your mouth that is answering my prayers. And when I physically cry to you, when very dark times come and I don't necessarily hear your answer, I know I already have it. Samson already had the answer. God said to his parents, he will deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. And he might have thought, just like Moses in Egypt, he started killing Egyptians with his sword. But God wanted him to destroy the enemy with a shepherd's staff. So in God's time, in God's way, and in God's will, all things will happen. We just have to understand it. We just have to look at it. Look at what he says, how it will be done. And then we can fall into his will, even if it does cost us our physical eyes, like with Samson. So the Philistines said, who has done this terrible thing? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. So unfortunately, the scary little bride that doesn't trust her husband and that goes behind his back and is given to the false Messiah will end up being burned alive. Samson said unto them, though you have done this, yet will I be avenged of you. And then, after that, I will cease. Very important. Now I'm thinking of Messiah Yeshua again. I will avenge myself. Yeshua will avenge him on all his enemies, including the beast, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan, who has stolen his wife and who causes his all of humanity was supposed to be his wife. And most of humanity will end up in the lake of fire. And this is because she has been given to the false Messiah. Well, she has allowed it. She has betrayed her own husband. But because of all this that the enemy has done, Yeshua will avenge himself during the end time judgment. And what will he do after he has avenged himself? He will cease. He will go into rest. We will have the final Shabbat. 6,000 years of plagues upon this earth. 6,000 years of suffering. 6,000 years of being away from our husband. And finally he will come and he will take his rightful place. He will avenge himself. He will avenge him. He has been hurt by the false bride, by the whoring wife. He will avenge himself on the whoring wife. Those who hasn't returned under this covenant bitter cup to him, who hasn't been restored to God, who hasn't become loyal and obedient and holy again to Yahuwah. He will avenge himself on his whoring wife. He will avenge himself on the enemy that has given his wife to his companion. He will avenge himself on his companion that has become an enemy. And he will avenge himself on all his enemies. And then we will finally go into the millennium, where he will cease, he will stop, and he will rest. His judgment will be over. And then we will go into a time of peace with his bride that has been made ready during the tribulation. The plagues, the judgment, when all that is done and over, then, like Samuel said, I will avenge myself on you, and after that, I will cease. And there's a bit of a sad twist to this. Yet I will be avenged on you, and after that, I will cease. In the life of Samson, his ceasing, or his stopping, or his being finished with judgment, ended up in his death. So he definitely did cease. He definitely did stop. After he avenged himself, he physically ceased to be, because he died. Chapter 16, verse 30. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might. And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than all those that he slew while he was alive. So yeah, they came, his brothers and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah, his father. So after 20 years of being a judge in Israel, he avenged himself in a mighty, mighty way at the end of his life. And then he ceased. It's a bit of a sad twist, because his ceasing didn't bring him shalom. He went to sleep in the grave, and he will definitely, I believe, see shalom when he is part of the resurrection with us. Okay, so the Philistines burned his ex-betrothed and her father. He said he will avenge himself upon them, and then he will cease. Verse 8, and he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. And he went down and dwelt at the top of the rock Etam. So he killed quite a lot of them. He smote them hip and thigh. You know, he really went in with all his might, and he killed quite a few of them. He doesn't tell us in this specific case how many. And then he went hiding. He went away. Remember, like the serpent from the tribe of Dan, he comes out and he attacks, and then he goes in hiding again. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into where he went in hiding, which I found very interesting. Instead of going home and hiding amongst his own people, he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Etam. So he's now on like a mountain area, and the mountain or the rock area is called Etam. Etam has the meaning of scream or shriek. You know, that shrieking sound, the screeching sound of a bird of prey. You know, like some of these eagles or falcons. It's almost like that shrieking sound. That's what Etam, what is the meaning of it? It's got the meaning also of like a hiding place of wild beasts. So the Philistines came up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves at Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why are you coming up against us? So here the Philistines are gathering ranks against Judah. And Judah says, you know what have we done? Why are you gathering up against us? And they answered and said, to bind Samson are we come up, and to do to him as he has done unto us. So what has Samson done to them? He's burnt their fields. But I mean, for heaven's sakes, what have they done to him? They've burnt his wife. So it's fine. It's almost like the vengeance has taken place. You can't, if you do something wrong, and somebody does something back to you in revenge, now you want to continue your revenge? Somewhere there must come some sort of a equilibrium. They've already now burnt his betrothed and her husband and probably the whole house, and he burnt the fields. So, we are done. It's done. It's fair. Leave it alone now. But they couldn't leave it alone. And now we're going to see the betrayal of Judah. And Judah, of course, is now the tribe that is not divorced by God. We can see the resemblance here between the betrothed of Samson and the wife that is represented by Judah. Both of them is now being deceitful against Samson. We must remember now, the betrothal or the betrothed pagan woman represents represents Israel for me, because Israel, the 10 tribes, has gone out of covenant, has gone out of the promised land, has been scattered into all the earth, and have served pagan gods, like Deuteronomy 4, 31, verse 30 to 32 says. And there we served other gods and we became totally desolate from God. But in the end days we will remember and we will return back to Him. But in the meantime, Israel is always represented by the whoring wife and the divorced wife and the prostitute and the lame and blind and blah, 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 all that, ne? But Judah was never divorced. So Judah is also the older brother that stayed home. But here, Judah, representing the wife that's not divorced, also betrays Samson. Samson's wife had been afraid of being burned by her own people. So she decided to betray her husband. She was more afraid of the enemy than she was of her husband and her husband's God. Now, unfortunately, when we live like that, when humanity lives with that kind of fear, where you fear the enemy more than you fear God, you will end up receiving the very judgment that you wanted to escape. But because she was Samson's wife, Samson decided to bring vengeance with a great slaughter. Those who do not turn in repentance after being warned about judgment will find that God's patience has run out and the end time judgment will be even worse. She tried to escape the burning that the enemy of Samson has threatened her with. And even through her being obedient to the enemy and being disobedient and disloyal to her husband, she ended up getting that death sentence anyway. People who's trying to avoid suffering in this life will end up getting that suffering that they're trying to avoid anyway. The whoring wife who's not going to become loyal to her husband will end up in the same fire that God will burn his enemies in with anyway. Don't try to avoid a slighter judgment and then gather up wrath for yourself in the day of God's judgment. And just like Samson's wife, the men of Judah feared the enemy, the Philistines, more than they feared God. Aye, guys, so in fact, they were so bothered and they were so being made scared by the Philistines who were ranking up against them, that they were willing to betray their own judge that was prophesied to bring them salvation from these enemies. It's almost like Judah, yes, no, they are slaves. We are enslaved by the enemy. We are in this system. But you know what? We're doing okay. It's almost like Israel was in Egypt. It's almost like they became, accustomed to being slaves in the Egyptian system. Same with the believers today. You know what? We understand we are enslaved by this world system. But it's okay. At least we can, still enjoy our lives. So they would rather stay in their comfort zone, even though they are slaves, than standing up with a judge that God has appointed to bring them deliverance. Can you see the amazing confirmation? Hey, my dogs are playing around here. You see the confirmation of the end time lack of faith, lack of action, lack of trust. Rather, for my own flesh, for my own comfort, for peace in my house and peace in my family, I'd rather just go along with what the enemy is currently doing. I just want to live a fairly normal life. And I rather fear my enemy more than I fear the God who said, no, don't go along with the enemy's plans. Stand up for me. Get your clothes whitewashed. Get it weer. And my dog's name is Samson as well. Samson. Stand up. Don't be satisfied with being slaves to the enemy. You are destined for more than that. I'm giving you Samson. He's a Nazarite. I'm giving you Messiah from Nazareth. We are supposed to stand with them in battle and not deliver them up to the enemy just so that we can continue having what we think is an acceptable life. And we will see Samson goes along with this. He goes along with Judah giving him up to the enemy. Messiah also, for a time, when he came to this earth, he went along, but he knew the end from the beginning. Messiah Yeshua was busy with a much bigger plan than we can ever understand. So he went along with the fact that Judah, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, the Jews, gave him over to the Romans to be crucified. He went along with it. Samson is going along with Judah, handing me over to the enemies. But there is a greater reason, a bigger plan, a messianic agenda behind it always. And here we'll see as well, Samson makes known the agenda he has. He's been called to kill the Philistines, so he kills the Philistines. So the men of Judah said, why are you coming up against us? And the Philistine says, we want to bind Samson and we want to do to him what he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah, 3,000. How coincidentally that it's 3,000 again. We've discussed 3,000. Do you remember? Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Etam. They went to the top of the screeching bird of prey. And they said to Samson, know you not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is it that you have done unto us? And he said unto them, as they did unto me, so I have done unto them. Well, there we have it. When people do something unto you, then you always want to take revenge. And it always ends up playing out badly for both sides. Because just like the Philistine said, whatever he has done to us, we want to do to him. Samson said, whatever they have done to me, I've done to them. This evil cycle will never end when people end up continuously to take revenge upon each other. But besides the point, here they say, Judah, they're telling Samson something they think he doesn't know. The Philistines are rulers over us, just like the Egyptians were rulers over us. And remember, just like God lifted up Samson to be a judge, God lifted up Moses to be the prophet. And Moses brought Shabbat back to Israel. And then the Pharaoh said, oh, you're making your people to Shabbat. Now I will require the same amount of bricks from them, but I will no longer give them straw. And then the Israelites moaned to Samson, don't you know the Egyptians are ruling over us? Don't you know they're making our life so difficult? You have brought more difficulty on our life. To hear the truth, even when you understand all the things that 2 Trees is talking about, especially in these end days, I'm contributing to making your life more difficult. Moses contributed to making Israel's life more difficult. Samson contributed to make Israel's life under the Philistines more difficult. But we cannot just lie down like a dead dog and let the enemy just continue stomping all over us just because we want to not rock the boat and not become difficult. and not become an enemy of the state, or throw a spanner in the wheels, or be the black sheep in the family, or whatever. This whole enemy system, this whole Antichrist false Messiah system is ruling over us. He has his what are they called? Apostles of light, and his false prophets. He has them in every department of government in the world today, and in decision making of the world today. And just because they are ruling over us, we cannot, like Judah did with Messiah, and like Judah did with Samson, just deliver up our Savior and say, let me rather just capitulate. Let me just relax and accept what my enemy does. At least I have some sort of normal life, new normal, and I'm okay. I don't want to be one of those people that are in the sight of the enemy, against whom he will then bring more difficulty in this life. So they said unto him, we have come down to bind you, that we may deliver you unto the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said unto them, swear unto me that you will not kill me yourselves. Judah were cowards. Instead of realizing what a treasure they had Samson, the strongest man on earth ever. They had him. Take up arms, Judah, and let Samson lead you into battle, Judah, and fight the enemy, Judah. But you're a coward, Judah. You hide behind your almost normal little bit of peace life that you think you have. And you're delivering up your biggest tool you had to fight against the enemy. Judah, you delivered up Messiah, your biggest saving potential you had, up to the enemy, just so that you can continue the life you thought you had. So Samson just said, it's fine, I'll go along with this plan, as long as you guys don't kill me. The same with Judah in the time of Messiah. Judah didn't physically kill Messiah. The Romans did. The pagan enemy did. Just like here, Judah wouldn't kill Samson themselves. They will just give Samson to the pagan enemy to kill. And they answered him and said, no, don't worry about that. We will only bind you very securely and then deliver you into their hands. But we will not kill you. No. And they just bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. So the Pharisees said, no, we will not kill you. We will just deliver you up to the Romans. And then they bound Yeshua with 2, when I say 2 new cords, just like here symbolically in Samson, Yeshua was bound. Why was he bound? Ropes couldn't really bind Samson. We'll see that in the next session. Ropes never bound him, except when when that, I couldn't say magical power, but when the Spirit of God left him when he cut his hair, and the strength didn't really lie in his hair. It lied in the Nazarite vow. It lied in the spiritual connection, the blessing that God put over him. There wasn't really magical powers in his hair. But when his hair was cut off, the Spirit left him and he had no more strength. But the strength he had, even when he was bound with 7 ropes, it wasn't enough to bind him. And whatever cords they used to bind Messiah wasn't really enough to bind him. But what bound Yeshua? What made that he went through and that he allowed himself to be bound? What caused him? What is the binding on the heart of God that caused him not to intervene? Remember, Yeshua said, man, put down your swords. I can click my finger and a whole legion of angels will come down right now and establish my kingdom and destroy all my enemies. I don't need you to fight for me. He could have at any time clicked his finger and he could have stopped the whole process, but something bound him. And it wasn't ropes or cords. It wasn't the Romans, it wasn't the Jews. What bound him was these two cords, these two ropes. One rope is the house of Israel, and the other rope is the house of Judah. His divided kingdom, his children, his lost sheep, the grain on the field, his wife, his betrothed, the apple of his eye. That's what bound Yeshua, so that he silently as a lamb was led to slaughter. He could have broken free like Samson any time, but he chose not to, because his heart is bound to bringing salvation and drinking the bitter cup and taking the curse upon himself, so that he can rescue and redeem his wife, and he can be betrothed and get married again because he loves her. It was love that bound Yeshua, and that's why the Bible says, God says in the Bible, Hosea chapter 11, when Israel was a child, I loved him. I called my son out of Egypt. As they called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed unto the Baalim and burned incense to graven images. I taught Ephraim also to go, taking them by their arms. But they didn't know that it was me, God, who healed them. I drew them with cords of a man, with bands of love. And I was to them as when you take off a yoke of your jaw. When you take a hook out of your jaw. Israel was eventually, with hooks in their noses and jaws, led into captivity to Assyria, just like Hosea 11 prophesies. He shall not return unto the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refused to return to me. But these cords that bound, these two cords that bound Samson, are the two cords that binds Messiah, that binds God, where he decides to be bound, not by man. Man cannot bind him. Cords cannot bind him. But the cords of love is what binded God and Yeshua, and led them upon this path where they seem to be, dead, silent, disappeared, gone. But don't be fooled. The second time, when he comes back, he will bring his judgment. I will avenge myself on you, and then I will cease. So Judah bound him, and they bound him with two new cords, and they brought him up from his rock. They took him away from his position, they brought him down, and they are now going to hand him over to the Philistines. All right, we'll look at what happens then. We'll look at that in our next session. May you be blessed. May you also, like Psalm 56 says, I just want to go back and maybe end with that. What was it now? Psalm 56. When I cry unto you, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know, God is for me. In God will I praise his word. In Yahuwah will I praise his word.